Man, God's first creation. Father, son, uncle, brother. On a journey of highs and lows, you were created in the image of God and given dominion in the earth, destined for great things and to fulfill purpose. Join us on Men on Monday as we discuss all issues related to men. We are unifying family, building strong families, building strong futures. Join us on Men on Monday.
Good morning. How are you today? I pray that you're doing well this Monday, the first Monday in October. We cannot believe it. We've said goodbye to September and we're almost ready to welcome 2022. So good morning. I am Marissa Boyce and welcome to Men on Monday. Today's Men on Monday show, part 2, healthy boundaries. And we say boundaries keep things in and boundaries keep things out. Minister Sinclair, Bishop Edison, Bishop Mark, good morning. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you? Hope you had a good weekend.
Hey, good morning, Marissa. Good morning, everyone that's listening. Yes, I had a reasonably good weekend. Spent a lot of time with the wife, but it was a wonderful weekend. No, I say but don't get the wrong impression. All right, we had a good weekend.
Had a good weekend.
Blessings to you. Good morning. Blessings.
Blessings to everybody, and I had a good weekend too. I got some rest, and I spent some time with my wife also. Yes.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Minister Sinclair, I guess you would have to say you spent some time with the wife too. If not, you'd be out of order.
You know, one of these things just doesn't belong here. So yeah.
Well, good morning to all of you on Facebook. Good morning to all of you on YouTube who are with us today. Healthy boundaries. Are we going to recap? This morning is Bishop Edison. You're going to recap for us? Or are we going to leave that to Mr. Sinclair this morning? Bishop Edison,
we're going to keep it brief. We were talking about boundaries, and we were talking about the fact that, as you say, boundaries keep some things in, boundaries keep some things out. Boundaries are limitations in that we limit how we interact with people. All right. So boundaries determine what I will accept and what I will not accept from other people. So we were talking generally about how boundaries work and some of the boundaries that you can have in relationships. So that's where we're going to kick off from with today's program. Marissa, you're muted.
Yes, she is.
Here we go. Right. Yes. I was there saying that, interestingly, as we spoke, one of the interesting things that we discovered is that even in marriage, there is a need for boundaries and healthy boundaries. Boundaries even with relationships that also affect the relationship. We had some interesting questions last week talking about platonic relationships. Are they possible within the marriage? Can they affect the marriage and so forth? Bishop Mark, your thoughts as we've been looking at boundaries for the last week?
Well, as we would have said last week, the importance of the boundaries. Even as Bishop Edison was saying there, he mentioned how with the boundaries is important that it's about what you want and what you expect and vice versa, hearing from the other person. But when he said that, one of the things that I think is important is that you still have to leave, because there are certain things that you might have as a boundary as a single. But then you recognize when you get into a relationship, you're going to have to make some concessions. You might got to move the boundary lines a little bit. The reason for that is that when you're by yourself, you can set certain boundaries, but then there must be an understanding that once you are now seeking to build a relationship, there are going to be some things that you will have. For example, financially, you might be a person who might be financially independent. You buy what you want when you want. You have been living single, so your money is your money. But then when you come into a relationship, you have to understand now that your money becomes our money from both ends. And therefore, you have now to maybe shift boundaries, where before you were more liberal in terms of you being able to pay your money when you want. If you want, 15 bags, buy a bag a week, Marissa, you come in a relationship, still want to buy a bag a week. without understanding your husband might want a pair of shoes. So these are the sort of things that we got to look at, because if you know, you got to balance it, because people think, well, like, come in this way, I ain't washing the shirt for you, I ain't cooking nothing for you. That's my boundary. Then we're talking about, we have to understand that you have to shift around the boundary lines to make the relationship work. So I think that's an important element to this, and that people don't come, you know, because you come with a lot of mindsets. So don't remember, in that certain mindset, it is the best boundaries that will add credence, or that will bring some sense of unity, right? In order for the marriage to flourish. That's what we like to put inside there. Yeah.
Good stuff. So, Minister Sinclair, this morning, what are we discussing?
Well, really on the aspect, Bishop Mark had really tossed in a very powerful point last week, apart from the boundaries, were consequences. The consequence, because you have a boundary, but if there's no healthy consequences as a result of these boundaries, then the boundaries are just talk. They don't make any sense. And so the whole thing of having healthy boundaries, which Bishop Mark was saying, not having boundaries for boundaries' sake, because then it's not a relationship. The boundaries have to be attainable and has to make sense. And we will be touching on some of the types of boundaries, hopefully today. But one of the things I've been looking at, especially it was brought last week, was the fact that a lot of us don't have consequences, one, or unhealthy consequences as a result of these boundaries being broken. Yeah. So I find that for a lot of men in relationships, when I look through and I really analyze it, one, we have unhealthy boundaries or invisible boundaries, actually. So invisible boundary, a boundary have inside of me, but I've not communicated that boundary and expect the person to live up to it. And then having consequences, no consequences, or unhealthy consequences as a result of the boundaries.
All right. So don't go anywhere. We're going to share more of that with you right here on Men on Monday.
It's all about self-care, self-compassion. Ladies, join us on Monday, October 4th at 8 p.m. It's Women of Excellence and Empowerment Ministries in the month-long series, Self-Care, Self-Compassion. Our topic, Get Your Groove Back, with President Minister Andrea Harris, Minister Michelle Douglas, Prophetess Cheryl Fitzpatrick, and hosted by Marissa Boyce. How can you join the discussion? Follow us on Facebook and also on YouTube. This Monday night, October 4th, 8 p.m. Don't miss it. Get your groove back. Self-care isn't selfish.
Yeah, so now we understand. Now we understand, yes, what has been happening with behind the scenes. Visit Healthy Cottage. I'll tell you more about that in the months to come. I'll tell you about that. And also Women of Excellence tonight. They'll be live with their self-care, self-compassion. It's 31 days of self-care, self-compassion for yourself. That's right. Let's start a new norm. Let us start a new norm. So we are looking at healthy boundaries this morning. Healthy boundaries and the consequences. And I like what we ended on before we went to our commercials. Interestingly enough, we must have consequences. It reminds me of parenting. You know, you can tell a child, you know, if they don't do this, there's a punishment. And if you don't follow through on that punishment, they don't take you seriously. Can it be also understood as the same way for relationships? Can it also be understood that way? Who's going to jump in and answer? Mr. Mark, go ahead. Unmute and come. You got to unmute.
I was hoping that Sinclair would have jumped in, though. That's the truth, because I'd like to hear him then to bounce off of Sinclair. Sorry to put it,
All right.
I really wanted.
Right.
I can do that.
Help me here. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. The thing about it, and I really want to speak from men's perspective, to be quite honest. Yes, overall relationships need boundaries and consequences. But what I found, honestly, that even when I'm going counseling, that for a lot of men, that they don't have boundaries, right? I mean, overall, both men and women. But I find a lot of issues there are a lot of invisible boundaries in a lot of in men's head. And some men actually do not have boundaries because society is kind of set it where, happy wife, happy life type of thing. So his focus is always on pleasing his spouse. I'm not saying all, please. I'm saying to you that is the focus. And what happens is that he gets frustrated by extension trying to fulfill something that is not possible. Yeah. And if he didn't go into the relationship with boundaries, and they talk respectful boundaries, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual boundaries, he could get frustrated. And then instead of communicating those frustrations, because he never came in with healthy boundaries in the first place, then he starts to disconnect. Right? So it's only when they start to have the concessions, then you hear these things come up, and it's like, where these came from. But you should know yourself enough to know boundaries. Like I said, before you got married, there were boundaries. There are things that my wife cannot say to me. I mean, it cannot. Yes? And
I agree
it's
with
like
that. Those verbal boundaries, especially, we tend to ignore those verbal those words, and they are bound. I wanted you to touch that. Boundaries are necessary there, especially with work.
But see, there's one thing I'm saying, because once again, I'm not beating anyone, I'm saying, but more often than not, if a man does something, he's a bad person, yeah? This is international. But a woman can more often not, curse a man out, tell him off, this thing, that thing. And yet he's supposed to be this strong individual that's supposed to sustain it because he's going to be a strong man. And I think that, my words, that's crazy stuff. Like, you have to have boundaries. Yeah. And I've said that before I got married, I had boundaries. So if you're going to curse me out, we're finished. It's not even a conversation, right? You decide you curse me out, you do all that, be done. Like, that is the consequence of the result of you cursing me out, literally. And that was before I was married. So those boundaries, physical, mental, emotional, and as Bishop Mark said, there's some negotiable boundaries. So you have negotiable boundaries, and they have boundaries that are steadfast. So I think that when we get to know ourselves and know where we're going, and having reasonable boundaries, as Bishop Martin mentioned, because some people have boundaries that are unreasonable and unattainable. That's we're not talking about that. And as a result, having healthy consequences, because there's some people, if you break those boundaries, they want to hit you or curse you back on those things. We're not talking about that, not unhealthy. So healthy boundaries, negotiable boundaries, and healthy consequences, I think, are the foundation of any relationship. Husband and wife, bank and a person borrowing money for the bank, church and clergy, neighbor, all relationships need boundaries and consequences to have a healthy relationship.
Marissa, if I can. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Bishop. No, you go ahead, Bishop. You didn't talk for more. I'm going to hear you. Go ahead.
I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Minister Sinclair was talking about. There can be different types of boundaries, all right? And you can have what some people would consider a rigid boundary. And we're going to talk about a reason why persons might have rigid boundaries or different types of boundaries. But the rigid boundary operates somewhat like this. I will shut off myself from people because I've been hurt in the past or because of an abusive childhood and so on. So that's a rigid boundary where that will affect your relationships with other people. You'll be suspicious, you'll be mistrustful, and that sort of thing. And you don't want those kind of rigid boundaries. As Bishop Mark pointed out, there should be a sort of flexibility at times. And that has to do with transitions that you go through. So before you were single, no, you are no longer single, you're married. So there's a certain flexibility that you have to have that will allow you to appropriately adapt in marriage. Now, you can have also appropriate boundaries, right? For example, I will know what people to accept in my life. Okay, so for example, I will accept people who can mentor me. I will accept people who will be a friend. I will accept people who are kind, who are considerate. On the other hand, I will not accept people who are rude, who are insulting, who put me down, and that sort of thing, or who are abusive. So you develop appropriate boundaries that protects you and protects other people. And then you can have loose boundaries. And the loose boundaries now is not even flexibility. There's the other extreme. People can do to me whatever they feel like doing, and it's all right with me. Yeah. So they can touch me up, they can curse me out, they can do whatever. I have no self-esteem, I have no sense of value. I have these loose boundaries, and people can do whatever they feel like to me. They can say whatever they feel like to me. I'm not going to respond. At worst, well, not at worst, but I may perhaps become passive aggressive at the most, but I'm not going to do anything beyond that. And you have some people that people can do anything to them. If they get in a relationship with someone, the person could abuse them, the person could curse them out, and so on. They will still go back to the relationship. And there are reasons for things like that. All right. And one of the things is sometimes you might have a person who has been abused in the past. So what they have learned is, I am not important. I am not special. I am of no value. And so this person set loose boundaries. Then you might have had parents that were very either permissive, letting you do whatever you felt like. They never corrected you. They never really disciplined you. Or you might have a situation where they discipline you arbitrarily. So sometimes you don't know what you're being beaten for. You're just getting beat. You know, the parent upset, they're angry, and they just beat you. So sometimes the parents can be too permissive, letting you do whatever you want, or they can be too harsh, where they're too punitive, and so on. And then sometimes you grew up and there were no appropriate boundaries set. You had no personal space. For an example, you know, you didn't have your own room. You had no personal space. Everybody was up in your business, and that sort of thing. Or you might have grow up in a home where the children now are encouraged to prostitute themselves. Oh, you know, as you get a certain age, go and find a man. Yeah. And so from that, they learn that in order to get this and that, I need to prostitute myself. So those are some of the reasons. Yeah. Of course, you have past experience, and then you have personality. That's the final thing I would mention. That sometimes people are introverted, so they're afraid to speak out for themselves. And sometimes when you're afraid, you don't set up appropriate boundaries. So just looking at some of the different types of boundaries and how some of those boundaries end up being set, even in cases, as Minister Sinclair pointed out, where the boundaries can be invisible because they're not stated, but mentally they're in the back of your mind somewhere, but they're not well defined, and so on. Yeah. So Bishop Mark.
Yeah, well, you know, as you're so very right, and as Sinclair said earlier, all of that is covered in respect. I think that's a very important aspect where we want our boundaries. If we want our boundaries to be respected, then we have to respect the person's right to want their boundaries. So that is why communication is a very important part of any relationship. Because as we are saying, if I just want my own way, or even comes over that I'm setting boundaries only to benefit me, I'm setting boundaries only for me being comfortable. I hear people say, as I was saying earlier, you know, I ain't the body maid, I ain't this, I ain't the next, I ain't here to clean the yard, whatever. And so it's important for us to recognize that there must be an element of respect. And then, even as you were saying, Bishop Edison, the reason that people are not able to sit down and deal with these issues with a sense of sense is because of their past and how they've been culturalized, what experiences they might have gone through in terms of, and not only that, how they would have seen their own parents operated within. For example, there are some ladies who would say straight and the body maid because all her life she saw her mother being quote unquote subservient without realizing that the woman has such a respect for her husband who was going out and working, and she at home, even though she's doing work, she felt that he should be pampered and taken care of because he's up there working hard. And they're seeing it as, oh, my mother was like a maid. You understand? So that is where it's important that there be an element of respect. And then with that, as I put a little note here, because Sinclair always reminds us of this, that for marriage and certain relationships, people need to be mature, but they're not usually people that want to get married and happy, far from being from mature. And that is why I think when they go to counseling, and maybe we as counselors, don't just talk about the position in bed, which side of the bed you like, and whether you go home or money, but that you speak clearly about respect and also about being open to the other person's wants and needs and those kind of things, because that will help then to be able to do what we're talking about here, to sit down and say, okay, I'll shift my boundary a little bit because I want to accommodate the woman that I love. I ain't gonna wash for you every week. You're gonna help wash for yourself, but I will include that in our list of whatever. And I think that is where the maturity comes, and that is not always what is available between two people that really care for one another.
Indeed. This morning we're discussing healthy boundaries. I have a question this morning. How are boundaries established in any relationship that has never had them, or the persons didn't have an understanding of how and why boundaries can be beneficial? Who will answer that question? You guys saw the question?
Yes, please. And this is once again, how long have the relationship been going on? It's going to be very difficult. Yeah, it's the same thing. Like you have a child that you would never discipline, and then at 10, 11, you decide you want to start lashing the child. You know what I mean? We got a formula for crazy right there. Yeah, because every child never exhibits. The child knows in a rebellious state. It's going to be very difficult to establish. And if we talk about grown people, every time we're in a marital relationship, and I'm making the assumption that the person means that, I hope I'm correct. It means that both parties would have to come and agree. This thing is not working. This thing is not going the right way. We need to establish boundaries. It's the same with financial boundaries. Let me use something a little bit different. Let me say a couple recognize, oh shoot, our finances are crazy. Let's decide we got to put boundaries in place. So you sit with a financial coach, they're going to give you a template. It's going to be difficult. If you have two people that are not accustomed to budgeting, it's going to take a level of sacrifice. It's going to take a level of discomfort. It's going to take but both parties have to agree on this. Because if one party decides, oh, I'm going to be disciplined with the money, because we're so accustomed to not being accountable and so forth, it may come over as, that person being malicious or why you asking me why I spend at the supermarket. It can get very weird if both parties are not on board. So to answer Ms. Bell, I want to say that both parties need to come on board, yeah, in relation to the boundaries, and then need both of them, because there's no way that both parties could be in there without you having a level of self-discipline. That's the number one thing. I think that Christians, I find one of the main things with us as Christians, especially charismatics, we lack discipline. We lack self-discipline. Is the number one thing I find we have gone off on a wing where the Holy Spirit is going to lead me, and is an excuse for not being disciplined, and that is in many areas of our lives. So that is the number one thing. I think self-discipline, self-respect, having a plan and a purpose before, and then the boundaries coming as a result of establishing the purpose of the relationship and the aim and the goals of the relationship. And I think all those would then lead into the benefits of the boundaries.
It goes back to my thought about communication. Because if a relationship has been established, you need to sit. And I think that's our challenge. We are afraid to sometimes sit and have those hard discussions. Where, like you said, if we're having a problem with our finances, at some point in time, you have to sit and say, we need to change something to get ourselves out of this position. Just as you would with a relationship. If you communicate, and something you said, Minister St. Clair, something that I hold true to. In our relationship, there are certain things that will not be said to each other. If we establish those boundaries and maintain those boundaries, we've set a mode in place. So I know we will not speak to each other in such a manner. The same way when we realize that we've established a relationship and we're going around in a cycle that is not working, we have to come at some point and say, something is wrong. This is not, I don't like this. You might be fine with it. Or somebody else says, we both don't like this. This is what we need to do to make sure that we can set a new platform, a new slate in place, so that our relationship can move properly forward in a healthy manner. But I believe that communication, these are the hard discussions that we don't really want to have. Go ahead, Bishop Mark.
Sorry, I just want to jump in 1 second. Sorry, just want to jump in 1 second, please. And this for the ladies, because we have a lot of ladies that are listening. And a lot of women ask for, please don't forget your points, bishops. But a lot of women ask for strong men. A lot of women ask for strong men. Yeah? And Marissa said a point there just now. And I tell women, honestly, y'all don't want a strong man. Women say, boy, you want a strong man. I say, no, you don't, to be quite honest. Because as Bishop mentioned before, if you did not raise in a household, especially seeing a meal, yeah, and we talked about communication, because even when men, and I really want to focus on men for a second, even when a man tries to establish a boundary, he's actually taught not to speak or not to be strong or be stern in a position, because what happens is there's a lot of manipulation that happens in relationships, yeah, on both parts, but I want to speak for men, where there's the shutdown, there's the lack of communication, there's the walking away, there's the shutdown in the bedroom. So men are actually taught the next time you do this, you're going to get more of this. Yeah. So by the time women say, I want a strong man, right? And we talk about boundaries here, it is not going to, the difficulty is that by the time this thing comes around where we want to have the communication to set the boundaries, the man has already been trained, do not step on my toe, right? So he learns to shut down. And that is one of the things that I really want to establish, that even when it comes to coming forward to boundaries, when the challenges is by the time it's so damaged that we have to go back to the basic foundation, so we can establish and to build. So I just wanted to say that to help us go forward. So.
Yeah. All right. I'll jump in just before the bishop. I think the question was, what can we do to set these boundaries? One, I think we got to recognize that our actions have consequences. So we start with that. Also, that we recognize that we have a responsibility to each other. That's where it starts. You know what? We are this together. Let me hear what you say. We can see how we can compromise and work our boundaries. So once they're then set, we have to determine, well, look, you know what? We are going to respect those boundaries. We're going to try our best. We might slip, and so on, but we have to respect. Then we need to evaluate our pain. Now, there's a funny one. I remember seeing this in the book with Townsend and Claude. They wrote this book on boundaries and so on. And one of the things was that he talked about evaluating the pain that the boundaries can cause each other. For example, if a woman feels that she, for example, shouldn't be washing, she don't mind but that should be her job, because we may got some issues too. We say, oh, if it's my wife, because this has been modeled to us, you must cook, you must wash, and there's nothing that says in no book, no way that has to happen. And so therefore, if that has caused your wife pain, you got to understand, I got to jump in, I got to help. And then the last one would be, once we said it already, sit down and discuss these boundaries, trash them out. And as we say all the time, if you can't get it done by yourself, because you might be damaged, there might be some issues that you can't get over, and that you already said, you might will never do this, you need to get professional help. And that'll be a few tips that I would put there to start the ball rolling for those who don't have it rolling.
Yeah, and I would build on that, because I think that both Minister Sinclair and Bishop Mark made some excellent points. Because the thing about it is, as Minister Sinclair pointed out, you can have invisible boundaries. So sometimes it isn't that there are no boundaries, it's that the boundaries are not clearly defined, or that the boundaries are contradictory in that we are not necessarily agreed. So I like the idea of looking at the pain, because in my own notes I have what makes you feel uncomfortable. What's the area of discomfort? And to be able then to use that as a point of discussion, because even when we talk about communication, the thing is, some people don't necessarily know what to talk about, because the whole idea of boundaries and setting boundaries is very new to them. And then you have to look at the fact that people have been socialized and conditioned to set certain boundaries. So they come to the relationship with expectations, with presuppositions, and sometimes those things are not articulated. So the thing is, what makes you feel uncomfortable? What makes you feel important? What makes you feel special? Yeah. What does God's word say about how you should relate to the other person, how the other person should relate to you? Is there a discrepancy between what the word of God says and what and what you are receiving. What would you like people to do for you? What would you like to do for others? So I think if you have some starting points as to what you can talk about, that can help you develop boundaries. The thing about boundaries too, that we haven't talked a lot about, is the fact that sometimes boundaries are developed by trial and error. It is only when you realize, well, this thing making me feel real uncomfortable. In the area of sex, for example, he wants me to do this, but I feel really uncomfortable. I don't want to go there. But it was not stated. But once you can talk about that discomfort, then that could be a way of you beginning to look at boundaries, and where you can talk about your expectations. You can talk about, this is what I cannot set. This is what I cannot set. I don't like how you deal with the money on this regard. You act like if the money is yours, and if I don't contribute to the income, or it could be a situation where one person makes all the money, and the person is made to feel like if they got beg to get money to do whatever in the house and that kind of thing. So you have to be able to identify those issues and be able to talk about them, and then you can begin to set appropriate boundaries. Oh, and let me say quickly, sometimes people can't set those boundaries on their own. Yeah, they need a little help. They need a little external help to help them to set the boundaries so that the boundaries are equitable.
Let's talk about that. Helping people set boundaries. How does a person not know that they're not able to set boundaries? That might seem very foreign for some people, but for someone who's not saying, how do I set boundaries? Where do I start? How do they begin the process? Clair, go ahead.
Yes, I quite agree. That's a powerful point. As a therapist, many times people don't have boundaries, and it is one of the most amazing things. So a person may say, "Oh, this person is very manipulative," yeah, and I ask the question, "Why do you think the person is manipulative? Oh, they're always taking advantage of me." I said, "Why is that? Why do you think that way, or why do you see it that way?" And at the root of a lot of that conversation, when people would have said, "These people manipulating me or taking advantage of me," they did not have healthy boundaries. So there's some people that have a victim position also, yeah. So they would almost subconsciously put themselves in a victim position. So it's a very powerful position, yeah. They don't go overtly. They come to a place where they're the victim and they control from that position, and they don't set boundaries. As Bishop said, a lot of that comes from childhood. When we look at the childhood, analyzing childhood situation where you had parents that would not give you healthy boundaries, parents that would just burst into the bedroom and burst into the bathroom and different things, and not giving you emotional space. Statements like, "Oh, when you do this, you don't know how you make me feel." Those statements actually take away the sovereignty of an individual. So eventually they don't have boundaries, or they're uncomfortable setting boundaries because they see those things as harsh or unhealthy. So many times I'm going through with people that do not have healthy boundaries, and one do not know to set boundaries, and they're very, very uncomfortable setting those boundaries. So they're going to relationship and they're taken advantage of. And as I said, for those who have that victim personality. So one is going back in their past. What they normally do is analyze, so you can title it, so they can be aware that they have unhealthy boundaries. They don't have a healthy no or a healthy yes, where it came from, and then I start to build. So I would say then you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, but they don't like to feel as though they're making people uncomfortable. So they're very reflective of people's emotions.
Yeah. I also want to add here in relation to setting the boundaries is that I think people got to take ownership of their own lives. In other words, that's where the problem comes, where people can't, because sometimes you feel so bad about your past, you feel so bad about your mistakes and so on because you haven't dealt with them. I think a key point to know is to take responsibility for your life, and I find it sometimes, with people, they so want to look good in front of their spouse, or to show or put forward this idea that they're perfect and they do everything right. I think that we need to deal with ourselves. I mean, even in Christendom, that's a problem a lot of people got. They come and they talk it well, they minister well, they're very consistent, but then don't deal with God and themselves with their weaknesses and the areas that, and a lot of us, if we're honest, we know where our challenges are, you know, but a lot of times we want to put ourselves there. So I feel that we need to take ownership of our lives. We need to take ownership for the things we like, our time, and all of that. Because once you do that and you start saying, you know something, if I'm going to be setting boundaries, I got to realize that there's some things that I always just say I will never, it can't happen. And I'm going to have to relax on that, because those standards that I set or boundaries for myself came out of when I was hurt, came out that way because the last girl or fella I had, I mean, not fella with fella, but, you know, girl with fella and fella with girl, I had, you know, caused me hurt. So you know what? I'm going to put up a barrier now. And so anybody that come on and saying, I love you in an easy way, I know I love you, but I'm saying that until I'm real sure, and all those things. And so it's important we deal with ourselves and make sure that we are not bringing any baggage to the boundary setting. Yeah, and if we are bringing them, we need to deal with them. That's why I say there's an aspect of, and I have a couple of people who call me and say, Pastor, I want to have some counseling. So I say, well, your spouse, no, I want some counseling for myself. And I respect that. I love that, where people can say, look, I'm going to marriage, but I got some issues I want to deal with you as a counselor. And they come, lay everything on the table, and they get help because they want to be the best that they can be. It's happened both on women and the men's side. And some people come long before they set a date to do premarital counseling. Why? Because they want to see what are some of the things that could cause problems. They wait to when they set the date and now their minds are set that, look, this date set, so we must reach that point. No, they come long before, especially when they start to see things rising up, when they start to realize that there are issues, they deal with them early. And that's what we need. For you, I always, in this case, if you can set boundaries real serious and you have people who are introverted and versus someone who's more extroverted, you need to go and get some help and let us pinpoint those issues that could very well be a problem. And if we are honest, a lot of people know, they know that they got an issue because it comes from hurt when they were 16, that puppy love they had, that body went and harmed them. And from then on, they started to just use the other sex to just get back that feeling of satisfaction. And then they find somebody to really love and to bring that there to the table. So it's important that we deal with ourselves. Make sure that we don't come with no preconceived, we don't come with no hurts. And if we do come, make sure that they're placed on the table and dealt with.
I think you need to be true to yourself. That's the thing that comes to my mind.
Good word.
Being true to yourself, where
yes,
you can really say, and that's what we talk about, you know.
Not an easy thing, though. It's not an easy thing. Most people can't do that. I tell you.
That's the thing, because if you realize to come to a counselor and say, you know what, I need to talk about this because this is an area I'm struggling in. And I think that we need to be true to ourselves. If you're struggling in a particular area, find a counselor. We've got 3 counselors here. Speak with them. We've got the Women of Excellence. If there are a host of counselors there who can say to you, you know, let's look at this area, let's examine this area, and give you some pointers on how to deal with your thinking, how to deal with your communication, your actions, so that you can become a better person. And I think that if we are true with ourselves and recognize I'm struggling in a particular area, then you become better and the relationships are healthier because of that. And I think we need to be true to ourselves. Look at the fact that this is an area I'm struggling with. And the truth is that sometimes you don't even want to address that area that we're struggling with because, as you said, Bishop Mark, it comes from a place of hurt. Something that you know, an area that we don't really want to address because it was a little painful in the past. Go ahead, Minister Sinclair.
I think Bishop Edison was saying something.
Yeah, if I can jump in there a little bit. No, it is important to talk. Sometimes you don't necessarily know what to talk about. And that's why it's important to connect with people. Because as you connect with people, even for example, if you go to a counselor and you don't necessarily know what the particular issues are, because some people don't know themselves. Yeah. So one of the things about counseling is that you learn to ask strategic questions that will help people to understand themselves better, understand their emotions, understand what they're thinking, understand their behavior. Because if you get people talking, many times you can begin to see what their values are, their opinions on different issues and so on. And then you can begin to help them to understand, but that this kind of thinking is unhealthy. Yeah. And so people need to be able to see themselves. But again, some people can't see themselves accurately. That's why before in a previous program, we talked about the mirrors, where you have the mirror of yourself, the mirror of God, the mirror of other people. so that by seeing through those different mirrors or through those different lenses, you can get a better picture of who you are. Yeah, because some people don't even know the effect that they have on people and the effect that their boundaries have on people. Because some boundaries can be set in a very crazy and arbitrary fashion that make no sense. Yeah, and cut off people, alienate people, and that sort of thing. So there's certain things that we have to understand about ourselves. But there's some basic rights, and these are things then that you can begin with these, but these are things that can be subjective that you still have to talk through. So for example, a basic right, I have a right to say no without feeling guilty. Okay, so there might be a time where I'm with my husband, with my wife, and I don't feel like having sex because for whatever reason I don't feel well, I'm not in the mood. I have a right to say no without the wife berating me for not wanting to have sex at that particular point in time. So remember, Sinclair talked about the healthy yes, the healthy no. I have to be able to say no and not be made to feel guilty, even in church, because sometimes the pastor might want you to do 50 different things. You gotta be able to tell pastor, I would love to do it, but I can't. Yeah, or else then you will end up feeling resentful, bitter, angry, feel that you're taken advantage of. So you don't want that. So you have to be able to say no without feeling guilty. You have a right to be treated with respect. Everybody deserves respect, and respect is not just conditioned on what a person does. Respect is respect. I have to respect Marissa. I have to respect Sinclair. I have to respect Bishop Mark. I respect these individuals not necessarily because of what they do, but because they're created in the image of God. So I have a right to be treated with respect, and I have to treat other people with respect. I have a right to make my needs as important as others. There's some people that they're always giving, they always want to do for other people, but from the time it comes to receiving love and people doing for them, they don't like that. But your needs are important, and if you're married, your spouse needs to understand that your mental needs, your emotional needs, your sexual needs, that these needs are important. They should not be trivialized. I have a right to be accepting of my mistakes and failures. All right. So the thing is, I will make mistakes, and I gotta accept that humanity. One of the problems that we have is outside of this is trying to fix other people's problems. But sometimes people need to take ownership of their own problems and deal with them, or else you will baby people all their lives, and that's not a healthy boundary. I have a right not to meet others' unreasonable expectations. If it is unreasonable, again, going back to saying no, I need to be able to say, this is unreasonable. I can't do this. It is beyond my capacity to do. It's beyond my resources, so I can't do that. So I think when you have a starting point, you can begin to build those boundaries. Yeah, by talking about what makes you feel uncomfortable, by talking about these basic rights, you can have a conversation, and you can flesh out some boundaries.
I was looking at I was actually looking to write those into the chat. So very good. There's a couple of things that Bishop's made a very good point that we'll be stealing. Do not bring baggage into the boundary setting. That is a very powerful point, because a lot of people, say, oh, you got to set your boundaries and you got to do this. But you could be bringing baggage and calling a boundary, and therefore it becomes very unhealthy. Another person asks, are barriers the same thing as boundaries? Maybe just to use a technical point where people could be using boundaries and call it a barrier, and call it a boundary, because a barrier is non-negotiable. It's set. When you put a barrier up, it is there. It doesn't move. So when we talk about rigid cornerstones, there's some things you could be rigid about, but I don't think it's a barrier that you want to have. You want to have a boundary. It is there. It's a line that is drawn. However, I said, because, as Bishop just said, I can come into the discussion with a mindset that is unhealthy. And as a therapist, I can tell you, many people that claim to know themselves, they don't. And the most difficult clients are people that believe they know themselves and not willing to listen or to learn. And Bishop mentioned one of the points is One of the things with boundaries is learning and accepting your failures and your weaknesses. That is one of the most important points, I think, that most people are not willing to accept their own weaknesses and their failures. So you guys be setting up boundaries based on healthy paths, set up boundaries without additional information, setting boundaries without knowing how am I affecting another person. Yeah, because in my head, every single person believe in their head that they're doing right. You understand? So that's why, as a therapist, and I say it to clients all the time, the reason that I can be honest with you and be truthful is because I'm not connected to you. I'm not your father, I'm not your uncle, not your mother, I'm not your brother, I'm not your pastor, I'm nothing to you. I'm just a third person that's willing to be honest and truthful to you. And that hurts because sometimes a person being honest with you can be very shocking because it's like, here's a mirror. I didn't know that I was doing this, but I was setting boundaries based on what my mother said. I'm setting boundaries based on the culture that I came from. I'm setting boundaries based on what television or music video said. Yeah, and it doesn't work. But I'm setting these barriers. Yeah, that should be boundaries and the negotiables. So there's some things where some women actually think that a man speaking passionately is him raising his voice. So these new terms or toxic masculinity. And I have to be saying to people like the guy is not shouting. Yes, he is. At that time, her voice is screaming at the dude, pointing her finger in the guy's face. Yes, he shouted at me, said no, he didn't. You understand? So men are now drawn into this position where they gotta speak at a very low tone. You know what I mean? And then turn around and say, oh, we want a strong man, as I said earlier. So we kind of have to look at these baggages that we're making boundaries with. And I love that term. The person asks barriers versus boundaries. And I think a lot of us have barriers and not boundaries. And the reason we have those is because we do not know self and we are not willing to hear other people tell us about our weaknesses and our failures. And therefore, we use couple strategies of or manipulative emotional strategies to couple from hearing these things and affects the relationships overall.
And Minister Sinclair, if I could jump in there and add this quickly, as Bishop Mark would have mentioned, a lot of people are hurt and they bring that hurt into the relationship. And that defines the boundaries that they set. And that creates a lot of unnecessary conflict.
Yeah, I think what I would add to all of that, which is very, 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 very informative, and I'm sure that those who are on are getting some good tips, and especially the ladies. I see a couple of my singles on the program, our singles ministry. So I know that they're learning and they will take back the information. But one of the things I want to put here in the midst of all of this is that you cannot will yourself to maturity. Okay. You can't get up one morning and be mature. And I think that's what frustrates people too, is that they want to come into these things, hear the information we give, and want to go home or go back to their place and get it right. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to understand that. I always talk about this for all my life. I've been saying as a leader, process is important. You cannot get from point A to B unless it's right next to one another. There's a process. You got to turn in the direction. There's always a process. Sometimes people want to run ahead. They're gifted. They got the talents, all the talents in the world. But until you understand the process, because once you start to express these talents, you become a target for the enemy. And if you're not prepared, pride will step in. You will fall short. You'll be the best minister in the world, most talented, and fail. And so people have to understand, one, they got to be real. They got to be honest with themselves, we discussed earlier, and understand that, look, I'm going to have to start. I'm going to have to take the necessary steps to maturity because I'm be damaged. I have things that I set up these boundaries because they come out of hurt. I set up these boundaries because I don't want a boy hurting me again. So my barriers are there and I change them into boundaries. And what happens is that we do not understand that you got to take it step by step. You might need counseling. You might need to be honest. You need to cry. Some people, confess, get before your partner that's the best buddy and bawl. Let them know this will hurt me. I don't want you to step into this place because of that, and be honest. But the important thing is to recognize it's a process. You can set a boundary and your partner can slip off it a little while, but understand the process. Right? Don't just set a boundary and expect that tomorrow when we get up, everything perfect. You will fail. There are things that will happen again because they're deep issues and you need to understand the process. I really like to put that in there. Understand that maturity is a process, right? It is not just a destiny, it's a process. And therefore, we have to understand. And that's why we talked this morning about communication, about recognizing and looking and working on yourself, right? Get yourself right. I always tell people, if you get yourself right, if each person seek to do that at individual basis and then come together to do it, man, we can got some sweet relationships. But these are the key things that we need to do. Understand the process.
I like that. I like that. We're coming to the end. Minister Sinclair, we're going to talk
somebody said somebody's crying in front of a man means nothing. Yeah. Yeah, because it's using manipulation. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you want to use it right. You use it for the wrong reason. Correct. That's right.
Because as soon as something happens, and let me use something that's outside, and I pointed out, I watched that crazy program, Paternity Court. You know what I mean? And as soon as things start, women start to cry. It's like me. I hear, I can see tears in your eyes. Like, seriously, lady, you're knowing here with 3 men that you're not sure their father is, and you're the victim. So before friend get go, right? So tears in front of mommy mean nothing because some guys we get accustomed to being a form of manipulation. Yeah. So not saying it doesn't mean anything, but it all depends on the situation. Yeah. And using tears to actually negotiate boundaries is not going to be very healthy. And that is the truth. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with crying, as I said. Please cry all, but it's not a space for boundary conversation. Yeah. And that is why many men they shut off after they see the tears.
So we've come to the end of our show. Bishop Edison, let's have your closing words. Bishop Mark, and let's share some information with our listeners before we say goodbye. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, in terms of what Minister Sinclair talked about, yes, the tears can be manipulative, but the tears can also cut off a process. So from the time a person begins to cry, we stop going through the process of setting the boundaries because this the person can't handle it emotionally, and that can cut off some things from happening. And we got to be very, very careful that we don't allow emotions to hijack the process as well.
Well, my closing comments would be, hey, this thing is work. As I say in a little book I have, Working at Marriage, these things take work, take patience. And we talk about loving one another. That's where the love really shows. We ain't got to be patient. We ain't got to be kind. Even when anybody ain't kind to you, that's it. And if everybody work with our principle, imagine 2 people coming together, all thinking about the other person, when about it, great joy. But it's hard to do, but it can be done. So enjoy the process. That'd be my thing.
Bishop Mark, how can we get that book? What's the book again?
Well, it's called Working at Marriage. I mean, you can. Yes, I can. What I will do is that I will make Healthy Cottage or one of my distribution centers. I will get the books to Sinclair, and you can collect the numbers there and everything. And Sinclair can then I will drop the books by him, and you can make.
I have them right there, right on the shelf. That way, look across.
Right, he has a couple, but I will make sure his stock is large enough, and to give my brother, so he will get to see the place and so on. Connect with Sinclair. He becomes my official distributor here in Barbados from today. All right, thank you.
What is the book again, Bishop Mark? Before you go,
it's called Working at Marriage. I'm sure Clair can run to the shelf now, put one on the camera, but it's Working at Marriage. And what if I compile, various things to help you with God in communication. Anger is a problem. Watch your bad habits. And a fear-proof your marriage. It's right. He's not telling lies at all. Working at Marriage. And you just contact Healthy Cottage. You will see the information there, and they will get that book to you. And as a special price on this program, right? And I intend to publicly tell Marissa this. If I get a lot, sell Marissa, I'll contribute some to your organization to help you push your thing. We will talk about that. But what to do then is to contact Healthy Cottage. I think you can probably give the number there, and you can get the books. And I'm going to sell them I may have to give Sinclair commission, so utilizing space. So I'm going to charge, but I'm going to charge only $20 for the book. $20 for the book. Yes, please.
I like it because as I'm thinking in terms of, you said process, and one of the big things I am big about is process. We must understand that there's a process to everything. Cooking, everything is a process. To get to where you're going, you have to start somewhere. And interestingly enough, hearing Karan says that, she says, my husband and I have read it. So it's important for us get that book.
Working
at Marriage.
Marriage
Working. I like that. And one of the things that I recognize is that persons who probably are not married or plan to be married should read this book. Read this book before they make that step. And I like us to understand that don't wait until you're married to then want to work at marriage. You have to develop the mindset before and put some habits in place. That's something that I've learned. You cannot decide, okay, so because I walk down the aisle tomorrow, I will start to work. It's about the habits that you have to create already to get you to that place. So let's close off. Minister Sinclair.
Yes, please. I just want to say thank you very much, Lee. Also, the things about tears. I know a lot of people speak about tears. Maybe we could talk about that the next time. Yes, they're genuine tears. So we're not being harsh or not understanding. We understand tears are from God, and we're not saying not to have those. But as we say, we are understanding, and God is love, and we declare that marriages will work, and relationships will work. We are here to assist you in all manner in helping those things to go forward in Jesus' name.
I like that. We need to understand that it's all a process, all a work in progress. Be true to yourself. You're not sure, give these gentlemen a call. Sinclair. I'm sure I can have him post some contact information for you gentlemen in our chat, so that should you need to contact them, feel free to do so. You'll post their numbers so you can make a call and have a chat. And there's nothing wrong with chatting about you. It doesn't have to be about a relationship. It can be just about you.
Yes.
And that's key. I've done it before. Just about you. So give them. So Bishop Edison can post his information. Bishop Mark there can post their information, their contact numbers for you on our live feed. I hope you're hearing me clearly, because it seems that we're dropping in and out this morning. But nevertheless, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Men on Monday. And I must say to you, do not forget, people, to join us tomorrow. What am I talking about? Tonight, sorry, this evening. It's all about the Women on Wednesday. They're starting 31 days of a healthy self-care, self-compassion challenge. And you know what I'm going to challenge myself to? I'm going to challenge myself to get in a massage more often. I'm going somewhere with this. I'm going to challenge myself to get self-care, to have a massage more often. Because sometimes you think that a massage is just about just something luxurious, but it actually helps your body. Yes. So I'm going to challenge myself to that self-care moment. You guys can find your moment to find your self-care, whatever works for you. So stay tuned. That has been Men on Monday.
Get your groove back this Monday night. It's all about self-care, self-compassion. Ladies, join us on Monday, October 4th at 8 p.m. It's Women of Excellence and Empowerment Ministries in the month-long series, Self-Care, Self-Compassion. Our topic, Get Your Groove Back, with President Minister Andrea Harris, Minister Michelle Douglas, Prophetess Cheryl Fitzpatrick, and hosted by Marissa Boyce. How can you join the discussion? Follow us on Facebook and also on YouTube. This Monday night, October 4th, 8 p.m. Don't miss it. Get your groove back. Self-care isn't selfish.